Hey guys, tonight we're taking a journey into a world lit by candle and torch. A world of faith, superstition, and unimaginable catastrophe. We are heading back to the 14th century, to a bustling, prosperous European city, to witness the arrival of the single greatest disaster in human history, the Black Death. We're going to experience what it was like to be an ordinary person, living an ordinary life, when rumors of a terrifying new pestilence began to drift in from the far off. Mysterious East. We will walk the narrow, crowded streets, hear the clamor of the markets, and feel the quiet. Creeping dread as a distant horror becomes a world-shattering reality. Now, for our little reality check, living in the 1300s was already a precarious business. A simple cut could lead to a fatal infection. A harsh winter could lead to famine. And childbirth was a life-threatening event. Frankly, you were far more likely to die from a badly set broken bone or getting your pocket picked in a dark alley than from some fantastical, world-ending plague from the other side of the world. This new pestilence was just another story sailors told, another rumor to be dismissed over a cup of watered-down wine. Or so you thought. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Your support is what allows me to keep these explorations of the past coming, and I always love to see where you're all joining me from. So please drop your city and local time in the comments below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your world is made of stone, salt, and ink. You live in the great port city of Genoa in the autumn of the year of our Lord, 1347. The city is a marvel of commerce and chaos, a proud republic clinging to the steep shores of the Ligurian Sea. It is a vertical city, a maze of tall, tightly packed tenement houses and narrow, winding alleyways, or karugi, that are often cast in perpetual shadow. The air is a rich tapestry of smells, the sharp, clean tang of the sea, the pungent odor of fish being unloaded at the docks, the exotic scent of spices from the Levant, and the ever-present underlying funk of urban life in the Middle Ages. You are a junior clerk in the service of the city's magistrates. Your life is one of order amidst this chaos. You spend your days in a cool, stone-walled office in a municipal palazzo, your world defined by the rustle of parchment, the scratch of your quill pen, and the satisfying heft of a warm wax seal. You are a man of letters and ledgers. While merchants and nobles bicker and plot, you are the one who records it all. You document trade disputes, witness wills, and keep the city's civic records in your neat, precise hand. It is a respectable, if quiet, life. Your daily routine is predictable, a comforting rhythm. You wake in your small but clean apartment in a tall house, the sound of church bells from a dozen nearby parishes ringing the hour for morning prayers. You eat a simple breakfast of bread and cheese before walking through the bustling, noisy streets to your office. At midday, you take your lunch with the other clerks, more bread, perhaps some olives, and a cup of wine. Your work is meticulous, while you use a quill for writing your official documents in the common Latin of the church and state. You watch the senior accountants use a different tool for their complex calculations in abacus, its wooden beads clicking back and forth with surprising speed to tally the profits from a shipment of silk or the taxes owed by a wealthy guild. In the evenings, you are free. You might meet a friend in the piazza, sharing gossip and watching the city's endless parade of humanity. You feel secure. Genoa is one of the richest, most powerful cities in the world. Its great rivals are Venice and Pisa, not hunger or sickness. You are a citizen of a great republic, a subject of God's divine order. The world, for the most part, makes sense. Lately, however, strange stories have begun to drift into the city, carried in on the same tides that bring the wealth. Sailors and merchants, returning from the great trading outposts of the east, from Constantinople, from Alexandria, from the Genoese colony of Caffa on the Black Sea, bring with them unsettling rumors. They speak of a great pestilence, a new and terrible disease that is sweeping through the lands of Cathay and the Tartars. You are in a tavern near the docks one evening when you hear a sailor, his face tanned and leathery from the sun, telling a wild tale. They say it began in the East, a sickness that rots a man from the inside out in 3 days. He says to his wide-eyed audience, "They say whole cities have been emptied, with no one left to even bury the dead." He then tells an even more incredible story about the siege of Kaffa. He claims the Tartar army besieging the city was afflicted by the plague, and in an act of diabolical warfare, their Khan ordered the plague-ridden corpses of his own soldiers to be launched over the city walls with massive catapults. "They rained death down upon our countrymen," the sailor declares, slamming his fist on the table for emphasis. You listen with a scholar's skepticism. It's a fantastic story, the kind men tell after too much cheap wine to make themselves seem important. You politely write it down in your personal journal later that night, filing it under curiosities and sailors' tales. The idea is too monstrous, too foreign to feel like a genuine threat. This is the general attitude throughout the city. The rumors are dismissed. The city's biggest public health concern isn't some mysterious Eastern plague, but the ongoing, unwinnable war against the smell emanating from the butcher's alley. People are worried about a recent rise in the price of grain, about the latest political maneuvering of the Doria family, about the ever-present threat of Venetian spies, an apocalyptic plague that kills everyone in 3 days. That is the stuff of fire and brimstone sermons, not the practical concern of busy, important people in the great hall where you work. You hear the senior magistrates discussing the reports from Kaffa. They are concerned, but not about the disease. They are concerned about the disruption to trade, about the loss of profit from the blockade. This pestilence is likely just an excuse by the Tartars. One powerful magistrate declares, "A way to frighten our merchants away from the Black Sea trade routes. Your own life continues its steady rhythm." You spend a week meticulously recording the details of a bitter inheritance dispute between two powerful wool merchant families. You help draft a new ordinance regarding docking fees for foreign vessels. You have a quiet, pleasant conversation with the daughter of a baker, a girl with flour on her cheek and laughter in her eyes. You think of your own future. Perhaps one day you will be a senior clerk, with a small house of your own, a wife like the baker's daughter, a family. Your ambitions are modest, solid, achievable. The world feels stable. You are aware, of course, that the world is not a safe place. You are a product of your time. You see a priest in the piazza, a wild-eyed Franciscan, preaching to a small crowd. He rails against the sins of the world, the greed of the merchants, the vanity of the women, the corruption of the clergy. He prophesies that God's judgment is coming, that fire and pestilence will cleanse the world of its wickedness. People toss him a coin or mock him, but no one truly listens. Apocalyptic warnings are a constant background noise in the 14th century. Historians of a future age will debate whether the famines and wars of your era had created a prevailing apocalyptic mood in Europe. But from your perspective, it is just talk. Life goes on. You are not blind to death. You see it often. You see funeral processions for the old who have died peacefully in their beds. You see the bodies of sailors pulled from the harbor, victims of a drunken fall. You hear of men killed in knife fights in the dark Karugi. Death is a familiar, if unwelcome, neighbor. But it is a retail business. It takes people one by one, for reasons that are understood. The idea of death as a wholesale slaughter, a force that could empty a city, is simply beyond the scope of imagination. The autumn wears on. The days grow shorter. The air cooler. More ships return from the east before the winter storms make the seas impassable. The rumors they bring are more frequent now, more insistent. They are no longer just third-hand stories from distant Cathay. Now they are first-hand accounts from Genoese sailors who saw men on their own ships sicken and die on the journey home. Their bodies marked with strange, dark swellings in the groin and armpits, their minds lost to a raging fever. Still, the city remains complacent. Sailors die of fevers all the time. It is a hazard of their trade. The city's physicians assure the magistrates that it is likely just a form of ship's fever, a sickness born of the bad air or miasma. Trapped in the hold of a ship for too long. It is a late afternoon in October. You have just finished your work for the day. You carefully blot the last line of a trade agreement. Sprinkle it with sand to dry the ink, and roll the parchment into a tight scroll. You seal it with a drop of warm, red wax, pressing the city's seal into it. You look out the high-arched window of your office. The sun is setting over the Mediterranean, painting the sky in brilliant strokes of orange and crimson. The harbor is a forest of mass. It is a beautiful, peaceful, prosperous scene. And then you see it, on the far horizon. A familiar sight, the distinctive sails of a squadron of Genoese trading galleys. Returning from their long voyage to the east, they are the last ships of the season, racing to get home before winter. You watch them draw closer, their dark shapes stark against the fiery sunset. It is a sight you have seen 100 times before, a welcome sign of the city's lifeblood, of its connection to the wider world. You feel no sense of dread. You feel no premonition. You are simply a clerk at the end of his workday, watching the ships come in. You turn from the window, gather your things, and head for home. Your mind on a simple supper and a quiet evening. You have no way of knowing that you have just witnessed the arrival of the apocalypse. You have just seen the harbor fill with the ships of doom, the morning after the galleys arrive. A strange and unsettling quiet hangs over the harbor. Normally, the return of a major trading fleet would be met with a flurry of activity merchants rushing to the docks. Families eager to greet the returning sailors. Stevedores preparing to unload the rich cargo. But today, the newly arrived ships sit silent and still at their moorings, and an official quarantine flag has been raised. Word spreads through the city like a nervous twitch. There is sickness aboard the ships from Kaffa. You are in your office, reviewing a property deed, when your superior, a senior magistrate named Niccolo, summons you. His face, usually florid and confident, is tight with worry. The port authorities are refusing to let the crews disembark. He tells you, his voice low, the sailors are claiming it is the pestilence we heard whispers of. I need an official report. You will accompany me to the docks. Bring your parchment and ink. I want every word recorded. Your heart gives a nervous flutter. This is no longer a sailor's tale in a tavern. This is an official matter. Your job has been upgraded from scribe of minor trade disputes to official recorder of apocalyptic symptoms. It's a promotion nobody wanted, and the work is, to put it mildly, depressing as you and Magistrate Niccolo walk towards the harbor. The atmosphere changes. The usual boisterous energy of the dockside district is replaced by a tense, fearful silence. Crowds of people are gathered at a distance, staring at the silent ships, whispering amongst themselves. City guards have formed a cordon, keeping anyone from approaching the piers where the galleys are tied. As you get closer, the smell hits you. It is not the familiar, honest stench of fish and tar and bilge water. It is a foul, sweetish odor of decay, an undertone of corruption that hangs heavy in the salt air. The ships themselves look wrong. You see a few figures on the decks, but they are not the hardy, boisterous sailors you are used to. They are skeletal, ghost-like men, their skins sallow, their movements slow and weak. Some are slumped over the railings, staring blankly towards the city they have struggled for months to reach. The harbor master meets you, his face pale. We have forbidden them from unloading or disembarking, my lord, he says to Niccolo. Most of the crew are dead or dying below decks. From what they say, from the deck of the nearest galley, one of the sailors, a man with hollow eyes and a desperate strength, calls out to you. Niccolo signals for you to begin writing. It is the wrath of God, the sailor shrieks, his voice cracking. It started after we left Kaffa, first a fever and a great shivering, then the pain in the limbs, and then the swellings appear. He points to his own neck, where a dark, purplish lump protrudes from beneath his jaw, a monstrous boil the size of a small apple. The gavoccioli, they sprout in the groin, in the armpit. They are the sign of certain death. We die in 3 days. The priests aboard died first. There is no confession, no last rites, we are damned. You diligently write his words, your hand shaking slightly. The doctor accompanying the magistrate points to the swelling. You make a detailed note, trying to maintain a professional demeanor, while the less professional part of your brain is screaming and trying to climb out of your ear. This is it. The thing from the stories, it is real. Magistrate Niccolo, a man used to decisive action, makes a swift decision. The source of the poison must be purged. These ships cannot remain in our harbor. He declares to the harbor master, they are a font of pestilence. Cut their moorings, force them back to sea, now. A desperate, chaotic scene unfolds. Men with axes run to the piers and begin hacking at the thick mooring ropes. The few sailors on the ships who are still able to move scream and protest, begging not to be cast out to die alone at sea. But the city's fear is greater than its pity. The ropes are severed, and smaller boats are used to push the grate. Disease-ridden galleys away from the docks, out into the bay. It is a futile, panicked gesture. The city's brilliant plan is to force the ships full of dying men back out to sea. It's a bit like trying to solve a house fire by throwing the burning embers back out the window. The effort is noted, but the result is predictable. The death ships, as they are now being called, drift aimlessly for a time before the currents take them, carrying their deadly cargo down the coast, towards other unsuspecting ports. Genoa breathes a collective, temporary sigh of relief. The source of the sickness has been expelled, but it is too late. The seal has been broken. The infection is already loose. A few sailors, desperate to reach their families, had slipped off the ships in the darkness of the first night, and worse. The unseen carriers of the plague, the black rats that infested the hold of every ship, have already scurried down the mooring ropes and disappeared into the dark. Crowded warehouses that line the waterfront, within 3 days. The first case appears on shore. A dock worker who had helped tie up one of the galleys falls ill with a raging fever. By the next day, the telltale buboes have appeared in his armpits. His wife and 2 children fall ill the day after. By the end of the week, the entire family is dead. Your job changes entirely. The ledgers of trade and law are set aside. You are now part of a small, grim team, consisting of a magistrate, a physician, and yourself, tasked with investigating and recording these new and terrifying deaths. You are a chronicler of the apocalypse. You will never forget the first house you enter. It is in a cramped, stinking alley near the harbor. The door is opened by a woman, her eyes wide with terror. Her husband, the dock worker, lies on a simple pallet inside. The room is dark and filled with the same sickly sweet smell from the ships. The physician, a man named Dr. Antonio, leans over the dying man. He is a man educated in the theories of Galen and Hippocrates, a man who believes in the balance of the 4 humors blood. Phlegm, yellow bile and black bile. He has never seen anything like this. The sick man is delirious, muttering incoherently. His skin is hot to the touch, and all over his body are small, dark spots, like flea bites, which the doctor calls lenticulae, and in his groin are the buboes, swollen and hard as stones. A dark, bruised purple. Dr. Antonio shakes his head in confusion. His humors are in complete rebellion. He mutters, "It is as if a poison is boiling his blood." You stand back by the door, trying not to breathe too deeply, and you write. You record the man's name. His age, his profession? You describe the symptoms as the doctor dictates them. A high fever with shivering, great pain in the joints, the appearance of dark swellings or buboes in the groin and axilla, a putrid odor of the breath and sweat, delirium. The next day, you are called to another house. This time, the victim is a woman. She has the buboes, but she is also coughing up blood, and her breath comes in ragged, wet gasps. She dies while you are there. Dr. Antonio is baffled. The pestilence seems to have settled in her lungs. He says, "It is a different form. You are unknowingly documenting the arrival of the pneumonic plague. The even deadlier airborne variant. A few days later, you record the death of a young boy who died in less than a day. He had no buboes, no cough. He simply fell ill with a fever and died. His skin turning a dark, bruised color after his death. The septicemic plague." Dr. Antonio has no explanation at all for this. "It is as if the pestilence itself entered his blood directly," he whispers, making the sign of the cross. "It is a demon. No natural disease works this way. The confusion of the city's best minds adds a new layer of terror. The enemy is protean. It changes its face, its method of attack. How can you fight a disease that does not follow any known rules? As you compile the first short list of the dead, a cold. Sinking feeling settles in your stomach. These are not isolated cases. You see the pattern. All the victims live near the harbor. They are the families of the dock workers, the warehousemen, the sailors who snuck ashore. The city's denial, which had been so absolute just a week ago, has been shattered. The whispers in the street are no longer about distant Tartars. They are about a neighbor, a friend's cousin, the man who sold fish at the corner stall. The city officials try to react. They order the houses of the sick to be sealed, sometimes with the healthy family members still inside. They command public prayers and religious processions, begging God to lift his punishing hand. They burn bonfires of aromatic woods in the public squares, hoping the smoke will purify the corrupt air. The miasma, which they are convinced is the cause of the disease, while they are busy looking at the air, the true vector of the disease, the rat and its flea, continues its work unseen, spreading silently from the harbor into the heart of the proud. Terrified city. You return to your office late one evening. The list of the dead on the parchment before you, now containing over 30 names. Each name is a world extinguished. You look at the neat letters you have inscribed, and they seem to mock the chaos and fear that is beginning to consume your city. This is no longer a rumor. The horror is here. It has a name. It has symptoms you have now seen with your own eyes. It has a ledger, and you are its keeper. You look down at the list, and you have the terrible, certain feeling that this is only the first page. In the grand, vaulted chamber of the palazzo, the city's magistrates convene a council of desperation, the most learned physicians of Genoa, their black robes a stark contrast to their pale, worried faces, have been summoned. You are at your small scribe's desk in the corner, your quill poised. Your grim new job is to record the official medical strategy for combating the great pestilence. The air in the room is thick with fear, and the scent of the pomanders the noblemen hold to their noses. Small silver spheres filled with ambergris and dried flowers. A futile personal shield against the encroaching horror. Dr. Antonio, your now constant companion in the houses of the dying, is the lead physician. He stands before the council, his expression grave. "My lords," he begins, his voice echoing in the chamber. "We face a pestilence of a kind not seen in living memory. After consulting the works of the great masters of Galen, of Hippocrates, of Avicenna, we have reached a consensus on its nature." He explains their conclusion. The plague, they have decided, is a miasma, a corrupt vapor, a pestilential air. They debate its origin with scholarly fervor. One old physician argues it is the result of a malevolent conjunction of Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars that occurred a few years prior, an astrological event that corrupted the very air of the Earth. Another insists it was born from foul vapors released during a great earthquake in the distant land of Cathay. But Dr. Antonio's theory is the one that wins the day. He argues that the miasma rose from the sea itself, from the foul. Stagnant air trapped in the holds of the cursed ships from the east. This corrupt air, Dr. Antonio explains, gesturing with his hands as if shaping the invisible poison, enters the body through the pores and the breath. It travels to the heart, where it heats the blood and causes it to putrefy. This putrefaction creates the fever, the delirium, and the dark swellings, the buboes, which are the body's desperate attempt to expel the poison. It is a comprehensive, learned, and entirely wrong explanation, but it is the only one they have. And from this flawed premise, a desperate strategy is born. You diligently record the city's official plan of action. First, to combat the miasma in the air itself. The burning of bonfires in the public squares is to be increased, but now with specific, prescribed woods juniper, ash, and vine. Their aromatic smoke believed to purify the air. Wealthy citizens are advised to burn scented woods and herbs like chamomile and rosemary inside their homes. To create a protective bubble of clean air, you are also instructed to keep a small brazier of coals burning in your own office. A rule which mostly just makes the room smoky and your eyes water. The city now smells like a giant campfire, but people are still dying. The plan appears to have some flaws. People are advised to avoid the south wind, which is believed to be humid and carry the most pestilence. They are to keep their south-facing windows shuttered. To block the invisible enemy, they are also advised against bathing, as it is thought that hot water opens the pores and makes the body more susceptible to the entry of the miasma. The city, already fragrant with urban life, grows riper by the day. The second part of the strategy is to treat the afflicted, to rebalance the humors that have been thrown into chaos by the plague. This is where your new duties become even more grim. You must now accompany Dr. Antonio on his daily rounds, not just to record the deaths, but to document his treatments. You go to the home of a wealthy wool merchant whose son has fallen ill. The family is frantic, their hope fixed entirely on the doctor. Dr. Antonio is calm, professional. He decides the boy's humors are dangerously out of balance, his blood corrupted by heat. The prescribed treatment is immediate bloodletting. You watch, your stomach churning. As Dr. Antonio unwraps his leather roll of polished steel instruments, he chooses a small, sharp lancet, while an assistant holds the feverish boy's arm. The doctor makes a swift, precise cut in the vein at the elbow. Dark, thick blood flows into a brass bowl. The theory is that by releasing this bad blood, the body's humors can be restored to equilibrium. The boy, already weak from the fever, grows paler. He faints on the bed. The doctor nods, satisfied. We have released the excess heat. He says, now we must pray. The boy is dead by morning. You stand by the bedside, recording the procedure in your ledger. Phlebotomy performed on the arm to release corrupt humors. Future medical historians will debate whether these treatments were actively harmful or simply useless. You see the boy weaken and die after the letting, and you ask yourself the same question: did the treatment kill him? Or did it just fail to save him? The most terrifying procedure is the lancing of the buboes. Dr. Antonio, in his desperation, reasons that the dark swellings are the focal point of the body's poison. If they can be opened, the poison can be drained, and the body can heal. You are in the bedchamber of a city councilman's wife. She is in her 40s, and a large, dark bubo has formed in her armpit, causing her excruciating pain. Dr. Antonio takes a knife and heats the blade in the flame of a candle until it glows red. The woman screams as two servants hold her down. The doctor, his face a mask of grim determination, makes a deep incision into the swollen gland. The result is not a clean release of poison. It is a gush of black, stinking pus and corrupted blood. The smell is unimaginable. A foul stench that fills the room and makes you gag. The woman faints from the shock and the pain. Dr. Antonio applies a poultice of clay and herbs to the wound. The poison is released, he says, but there is no conviction in his voice. The woman's fever rages higher than ever, and she dies that night. The infection from the lancing likely hastening her end. The theory may need revision. You record the strange and useless prescriptions Dr. Antonio tries. He gives his patients a thick, treacle-like concoction called theriac, a famous cure-all passed down from the ancient Greeks, containing dozens of ingredients, including viper's flesh, opium, and cinnamon. It does nothing. He prescribes potions made of vinegar and rose water to cool the fever. He even, in one desperate case, grinds a small emerald into a fine powder and has the patient drink it in a cup of wine. A treatment so expensive only the richest can afford it. It is believed that the purity and power of the gemstone can fight the corruption inside the body. The patient dies. His family now not only bereaved, but also significantly poorer. The doctor's prescription for a dying man is a potion of vinegar, crushed pearls, and hope. They're out of crushed pearls. Over the course of a few weeks, you witness the slow and complete erosion of Dr. Antonio's spirit. He began with the supreme confidence of a learned man. Armed with the accumulated knowledge of the ages, he applied his theories with rigor and sincerity. And he has watched every single one of his patients die. The tools of his trade, the lancet, the medical texts, the expensive herbs are utterly useless against this new foe. You see the change in his eyes. The professional detachment is gone, replaced by a raw, haunted fear. He begins to spend more time in prayer than in diagnosis. He still goes through the motions of his treatments, but the belief behind them has crumbled. He is a general whose army has been annihilated, whose fortress has been breached, left with nothing but the empty words of outdated strategies. The chapter of official medical response ends for you one rainy afternoon in the palazzo of one of Genoa's great noble families. Their only son and heir has succumbed. Dr. Antonio tried everything in his arsenal bloodletting. Poultices, the most expensive theriac. Nothing worked. You walk out of the grand villa with the doctor. He leans against the cold, damp stone of the garden wall, the rain plastering his gray hair to his scalp. He looks utterly defeated, a man hollowed out by his own helplessness. "I don't understand," he whispers, his voice barely audible over the drumming of the rain. "I did everything the masters taught us. I balanced the humors. I purged the poisons. But it makes no difference. Rich, poor, young, old, they all die. It is as if medicine itself is a lie. Or perhaps this is not a disease of the body at all." He looks at you, his eyes filled with a new and terrifying thought. Perhaps it is a disease of the soul, a punishment from God so great that no earthly medicine can touch it. You look at this good man, this educated man, the pinnacle of your city's knowledge, and you see in his eyes the death of reason. The city's official, rational response has failed. The physicians are helpless. The theories are useless. You realize with a cold certainty that your city is not just fighting a disease. It is fighting a force. And it has no weapons. From this point on, every man, woman, and child is on their own. The physician's helplessness is a spark in a tinder, dry forest. Once the people of Genoa realize that the learned doctors have no cures, that their potions and prayers are useless, a new and more corrosive plague begins to spread through the city pure. Untempered fear, the sickness, which had been confined to the dockside quarters. breaks its containment and begins to flow through the winding Karugi like a black tide. Seeping under every door, into every household, your job transforms again. You are no longer documenting the symptoms of a new disease. You are simply trying to keep up with the sheer volume of its victims. Your ledgers, once filled with property disputes and trade tariffs, now have only one subject. Page after page is filled with names, ages, and a single. Stark notation decessit in pestilentia. Died in the pestilence. At first, the number is 10 a day, then 20, then 50. Within a few weeks, you are recording over 100 deaths each day. The number becomes an abstraction, a monstrous arithmetic that loses all human meaning. But each night, you go home and read the names you have written, forcing yourself to remember that each one was a life, a world. Now extinguished, the sound of the city changes. The boisterous symphony of life, the haggling of merchants, the shouting of sailors. The laughter of children is silenced. It is replaced by a new, horrifying soundscape. The primary sound is the constant, mournful tolling of church bells, ringing the death knell for the endless stream of departing souls. So many die that the bells ring from dawn until dusk. A ceaseless, monotonous dirge that becomes the new heartbeat of the city. This is punctuated by the sound of weeping, a sound that seems to bleed through the stone walls of every house. And soon, a new sound joins the chorus, the low, ominous rumble of wooden cartwheels on cobblestones at night. A sound that will come to be the most feared in the city. The miasma theory of the doctors may have been wrong, but the city now truly does have a bad air. The smoke from the purifying bonfires cannot mask the cloying. Swedish smell of sickness and death that begins to hang in the narrow streets. A constant reminder of the invisible enemy. It is the dissolution of the most sacred human bonds. However, that marks the true collapse. Fear proves to be a stronger force than love, duty, or kinship. You witness it with your own eyes. A daily pageant of heartbreak and betrayal that you record in your journal with a numb, despairing hand. It begins with neighbors. A family would fall sick. And the people next door, people who had shared bread with them for 20 years, would seal their adjoining doors and windows, refusing to answer their cries for help. Then, the plague entered the houses. And the final, most terrible taboo was broken. Family began to abandon family. Your duties now include accompanying a notary to witness the hastily scribbled last wills and testaments of the dying. You stand in the doorway of a wealthy merchant's house, your face wrapped in a vinegar-soaked cloth. The merchant lies dying on his bed, his wife and children having already fled to their country estate, leaving him in the care of a single, terrified servant. He dictates his will, leaving his vast fortune to children who were too afraid to watch him die. You've become an expert in deathbed wills. The formula is usually the same. To my eldest son, I leave my crippling debt. To my wife, a lifetime of grief. And to the church, my soul. Assuming they'll have it, you see a young woman on the street, weeping uncontrollably. She tells you her own mother, upon seeing the first signs of sickness on her, had chased her from the house, throwing her clothes out the window after her. She said she had other children to think of. The girl sobs. She barred the door against her own daughter. This is the work of the plague. It turns love to terror and makes monsters of ordinary people. As the civic order crumbles, two opposing responses emerge from the terrified populace. Two extreme paths for souls adrift in a sea of death. Some, believing the plague to be a direct punishment from God for the sins of mankind, turn to frantic, extreme piety, the churches. Though many priests have died or fled, are packed day and night with people praying for deliverance. And a new terrifying movement appears on the streets. The flagellants. They are groups of men, stripped to the waist, who march in procession through the city, chanting prayers and whipping their own backs with leather scourges tipped with iron. Their skin is flayed, their backs a bloody pulp. But they continue, believing their self-inflicted suffering will appease God's wrath, that they can take the sins of the city upon themselves. You see them pass, a grim and ghastly spectacle of faith and madness, their chants mingling with the tolling of the bells. At the opposite extreme are those who, seeing the certainty of death, decide to abandon all morality. If the world is ending, they reason, then the laws of God and man are meaningless. Taverns, abandoned by their owners, are broken into and become dens of constant, frenzied debauchery. People drink themselves into oblivion, spending their last hours in a desperate attempt to forget their terror. They break into the empty homes of the dead and feast on their food, dress in their fine clothes. All social restraint is gone. Half the city has decided the end is nigh and is trying to repent for every sin they've ever committed. The other half has also decided the end is nigh and is trying to commit every sin they haven't gotten around to yet. The mood is mixed. The economic life of Genoa, its very heart, stops beating. The great market in the piazza, once a riot of commerce, is now nearly deserted. The farmers from the countryside, terrified of the sickness, no longer bring their produce into the city. Food becomes scarce. The great merchant families, the source of the city's wealth, either lock themselves in their palazzi or flee to their country villas. Leaving their businesses shuttered, the machine of commerce grinds to a halt. Sociologists of a distant time will debate the consequences of such a catastrophe. Does it lead to total anarchy, or do new? Grim social structures emerge. You see both. You see the anarchy in the abandoned sick, the lawlessness in the streets, but you also see new orders being formed out of the chaos. The flagellants are one, and new. Grim professions begin to appear men, often the poorest and most desperate, who for a high wage agree to become bikini, the handlers of the dead. You are in your office late one night, the flickering candlelight casting long shadows on the walls. The list of the dead for that day is longer than your arm. You can no longer feel sadness, only a cold, hollow numbness from the street below. You hear the sounds of your dying city, a drunken song, spilling from a tavern, full of desperate hollow cheer, the rhythmic, monotonous chant of a flagellant procession as they make their bloody way through the dark streets. A single high-pitched scream from a nearby house, abruptly cut off. The city you knew, the proud, bustling, confident republic, is gone. It has been replaced by this charnel house, this theater of fear and desperation, a place where the rules of civilization have been suspended. You look at the long list of names on your ledger. It is a book of ghosts, and you realize, with a chilling certainty, that the most fundamental of all social contracts, the sacred duty to care for the sick and to bury the dead with honor and dignity, is itself beginning to break. The city is falling, and the worst is yet to come. The tolling of the church bells begins to falter, not because the dying has lessened, but because the bell ringers themselves are dying. The priests who once performed the last rites are falling sick at the bedsides of the afflicted, their holy office offering no protection. The gravediggers, exhausted and terrified, are either demanding fortunes for their work or have succumbed to the very graves they were meant to dig. You remember how a burial used to be. You remember your own grandmother's passing. Years ago. The quiet dignity of it. The family washing her body and wrapping it in a clean linen shroud. The wake held in your home, where neighbors came to pay their respects and share memories. The solemn procession to the parish church, the priest leading the way, chanting the psalms for the dead, the requiem mass, the scent of incense, the promise of resurrection, The final interment in the small, crowded churchyard, a plot of consecrated ground where she would rest among her ancestors until Judgment Day. It was a ritual of grief, but also one of order, of faith, of community. A good death. That world is gone. That ritual is a forgotten luxury. The churchyards are the first to be overwhelmed. They are small, ancient plots of land, and they are filled to capacity within a month. There is literally no more sacred ground in which to bury the dead. At first, they dig up the old graves to make room for the new, cramming multiple bodies into a single plot. But soon, even that is not enough. The dead are coming too quickly. They begin to pile up in the houses. The family's too frightened or too sick themselves to move them. And so, out of this desperation, a new and terrible profession is born. The bikini, the body collectors, they are not the city's respectable undertakers. They are the wretched refuse of the dying city-hardened criminals released from the prisons. Foreign sailors stranded with no money, and desperate men so destitute that they are willing to risk a gruesome death for a handful of coins. They travel in small gangs, their faces often wrapped in rags, their eyes hard and merciless. They are fueled by wine and a profound indifference to the horrors they witness. Their arrival on a street is a new sound of terror, the rumble of their handcarts and their hoarse, impatient cry, "Bring out your dead! You are tasked by Magistrate Niccolo to oversee this new, grim system, to at least try to keep a tally of the bodies being removed. To maintain some shred of civic order, it is a task that will permanently scar your soul." You stand on a street corner at night, your ledger in hand, a torch sputtering beside you, and you watch the bikini work. You see a door open and a man, his face a mask of grief, gesture towards his own home. He has paid the bikini their exorbitant fee. They enter, and a moment later, emerge dragging the shrouded bodies of his wife and 2 children. They show no reverence. The bodies are handled like sacks of grain, thrown unceremoniously into the cart, one on top of the other. The father lets out a sob, and one of the bikini turns to him. "Have more coin," he grunts. "We can take you too. Save you the trouble of waiting." They are not just body collectors, they are vultures. They loot the houses of the dead, taking jewelry, coins, anything of value before they take the corpse. And sometimes, in their drunken haste, they take those who are not yet dead, the dying who are too weak to protest. Bundling them in with the truly deceased, you follow one of the death carts on its nightly journey. It does not go to a church. It rumbles through the empty, moonlit streets, out of the city gates, to an open field where the stench of death hangs heavy in the air. Here, you witness the final solution to the city's problem. A massive trench has been dug in the earth, 50 feet long, 20 feet wide, and impossibly deep. A plague pit. Several other carts are already there, their grim crews working under the light of smoking torches. They back their carts up to the edge of the pit and simply tip them over. The bodies tumble out, a silent, tangled avalanche of limbs and shrouds, landing with a soft, sickening thud at the bottom of the trench. There are no prayers. There are no names read aloud. There is no ceremony. Men, women, and children are piled together. An anonymous mass of flesh. You watch, your hand clutching your ledger, as a new layer of bodies covers the old. A chronicler from the city of Siena. You will later hear. Describe this process with a haunting accuracy. The bodies are laid down in the pits, layer by layer, like lasagna with cheese. When a layer is complete, a thin covering of earth is shoveled over it, and the process begins again. This is how you bury the world. The loss of the sacred rituals creates a new and profound spiritual terror in the city. To die from the plague is a horror, but to die without confession, without last rites, and to be thrown nameless into a pit of unconsecrated earth, this is a terror for the soul itself. People begin to believe that to die this way is to risk damnation. What becomes of the souls of those buried like animals? Does God recognize them without the church's final blessing? This question haunts the living. Adding a spiritual agony to their physical fear, the horror becomes personal. You hear that the baker's daughter, the girl with the laughing eyes you spoke with what feels like a lifetime ago, has fallen ill. Her family is well off enough to have barricaded themselves in their home above their shop. But the plague is not stopped by bars or locks. It seeps through the cracks. One night, while making your rounds, you see the death cart stop outside the bakery. You watch, frozen in helpless horror, as two bikini carry out a small, shrouded form. You know it is her. You abandon your post. You follow the cart. You must see. You must bear witness. You follow its rumbling path through the dark. Silent city, out to the fields of the dead. You watch as the cart is backed up to a new pit. This one only half full. You watch as her small body is tipped over the edge, tumbling down to join the anonymous, tangled heap of her fellow citizens. You stand at the edge of the pit long after the bikini have gone, their drunken laughter fading into the night. The moon is high and cold. You look down into the mass grave, at the hundreds of your townsfolk, and you feel the last of your professional numbness shatter, replaced by a grief so vast and empty it feels like a physical hole in your chest. You thought you had seen the worst of the plague in the dying rooms of the city, but you were wrong. This is the worst. This is the true horror. The plague does not just kill the body. It annihilates the person. It erases their name, their history, their humanity. It denies them the dignity of a personal grief, the comfort of a sacred rite, the peace of a hallowed grave. It reduces every citizen, from the richest noble to the poorest child, to an anonymous object to be disposed of in a ditch. You stand there until the first gray light of dawn touches the sky. You look at this mass grave, this terrible wound in the earth, and you understand that the plague is destroying more than just the people of your city. It is destroying the city's soul. It is erasing the very beliefs and rituals that gave life and death their meaning. The world has not just become a place of death. It has become a place where even the dead can find no rest. The system of mass burial, born of desperation, becomes a grim and efficient routine. The nightly rumble of the death carts is now just another sound in the city, as commonplace as the cry of gulls, but as the plague continues its relentless harvest, a new phase begins. The chaos and the frantic activity of the initial outbreak begin to die down. Not because the plague is weakening, but because there are simply fewer people left to die. The city, having passed through a fever of panic and death, now sinks into a coma. You walk through the streets of Genoa, and the overwhelming sensation is one of profound and unnatural silence. The city is a tomb. The great piazza, which once thronged with so many people you could barely push your way through, is now a vast, empty expanse of stone. The wind blows refuse across the flagstones in lonely, swirling eddies. The merchants' stalls are overturned, their canvas awnings flapping in the breeze like tattered funeral shrouds. The only sounds are the echo of your own footsteps, the ceaseless wind whistling down the narrow Karugi, and the faint, distant tolling of a single church bell, a stubborn survivor ringing out its mournful count to a city that no longer listens. Your official duties have become meaningless. There is no one left in the magistrate's office to report to. The ledgers of the dead are full, and there is no one to record the new names anyway. So you give yourself a new job. You become a witness, a ghost walking through a city of ghosts. Each day, you force yourself to walk the deserted streets, to see the full extent of the desolation, to remember what has been lost. You feel a strange and solemn duty to be the city's memory, for you fear there will be no one else left to tell its story. The silence is what haunts you most. It is a heavy, oppressive thing, a silence born not of peace, but of absence. You walk for an hour and see no other living soul. You are now one of the only people moving through Genoa. The good news is there's never any traffic. The bad news is that the city is an open tomb. The city has become a museum of interrupted lives. Doors, once carefully barred, now hang open, creaking on their hinges. You look into the houses as you pass. They are like stage sets where the actors have all vanished in the middle of a scene. In one house, you see a dining table set for a family meal that was never eaten. The bread now hard as stone. The wine in the decanter turned to vinegar. In another, you see a piece of weaving still on the loom. The shuttle resting in the middle of a row, as if the weaver had simply gotten up for a moment and never returned. You enter a nobleman's house and find a magnificent feast left rotting on the table, attended only by a swarm of flies. It was a dinner party where the guest of honor was the pestilence, with the human population decimated. The city's other inhabitants begin to take over. Rats. The secret kings of the plague city are now brazen, scurrying openly in the streets. Packs of stray dogs. Their owners, long dead, have grown feral and gaunt. They're howling at night, a new and lonely sound. Weeds, green and shockingly vibrant, begin to sprout between the cobblestones. The natural world, which man had so carefully paved over and pushed back, is beginning to creep back in, indifferent to the human tragedy, in this silent, empty world. Your own mind becomes a dangerous place. The external markers of time have dissolved. There are no market days, no church services, no morning rush of workers. The days bleed into one another, a monotonous sequence of lonely dawns and terrifying dusks. You find yourself talking aloud, your own voice a startling intrusion into the silence, just to confirm that you are still here, that you still exist. The isolation warps your sense of fear. You are still terrified of the unseen pestilence. Wiping down your face with vinegar-soaked cloths and avoiding the houses marked with the plague cross. But a new fear develops, a fear of the living. On the rare occasion you see another human figure in the distance. Your first instinct is not relief, but a jolt of pure animal terror. Who are they? Are they sick, walking carriers of the miasma? Are they one of the desperate, starving survivors who would kill you for the loaf of bread under your arm? Every encounter is a moment of high tension. You see a man across a piazza, and you both freeze, staring at each other like two wild animals who have stumbled upon the same waterhole. After a long, silent moment, you both turn and walk away in opposite directions. Your shared solitude preferable to the risk of contact. You used to record the business of the living. Now you are the unofficial librarian for the dead, reading the stories left behind in their silent houses. You think of the bureaucracy you served, the world of wax seals, legal statutes, and notarized deeds. It seems like a child's game now, a fragile illusion of order built on the assumption that the world would continue as it always had. The plague has shown that civilization is a thin, brittle veneer. Underneath lies only chaos and a vast, terrifying silence. One day, in the midst of this profound desolation, you find a small flicker of connection. You are walking through a deserted neighborhood when you hear a weak cry from an upper window. You look up and see an old woman, her face a pale mask of fear. She is one of the sealed in, a prisoner in her own home. She lowers a basket on a rope. "In the name of the Virgin," she croaks. "If you have any bread, share it." You have half a loaf from a deserted bakery? Without thinking, you place it in the basket. She hauls it up, her movements slow and frail. A moment later, she lowers the basket again. Inside is a small, withered apple. It is a trade, a transaction, a moment of shared humanity in a world where such things have become almost extinct. You never see her face again, but the memory of her gift, the small, wrinkled apple, becomes a treasure, a proof that not everyone has been turned into a monster by fear as you continue your lonely pilgrimage. You acquire a companion, a small, scruffy dog, thin as a whip, begins to follow you. At first, you try to shoo it away, fearing it might carry the plague. But it is persistent, keeping a cautious distance but always there, its sad brown eyes watching you. One day, you share a piece of your bread with it. From that moment on, it is your shadow. It sleeps at a distance when you find shelter for the night. It trots behind you on your daily walks. It's simple. Unquestioning presence is a profound comfort, a silent conversation that keeps the madness of total isolation at bay. The days turn into weeks. The city is caught in a strange, deathly stasis. The living are in hiding, the dead are in the pits, and you and your dog are the lonely custodians of the silent streets. One evening, you climb the bell tower of a small, abandoned church. From the top, you look out over the city as the sun sets. Genoa is beautiful in the fading light. The red-tiled roofs glow. The stone towers are silhouetted against a purple sky. From up here, it almost looks like the city you remember, but it is a dead beauty. You scan the horizon, looking for signs of life. You see a few. Scattered points of light. A flickering candle in a window here. A thin plume of smoke from a chimney there. Each light is an isolated island of survivors, huddled in their homes. As alone as you are, you stand there with your canine companion, a silent witness to a city that has died but has not yet been buried. You are the last clerk, your mind the final ledger of what has been lost. A feeling of loneliness so profound it feels like a physical ache settles into your bones. You look out at the silent streets, the empty harbor, the setting sun, and for the first time, you truly wonder if the world will ever be full of people again. The silence of the dead city does not last forever. It is a deep, cold lake. And now, stones are beginning to drop into it, sending ripples of human activity across its stagnant surface. In the weeks that follow the plague's devastating peak, a new chapter begins. The story is no longer about the dying, but about the few who are left behind. As a solitary witness to the city's fall, you now become a witness to the battle for its soul. You see that in the crucible of this great calamity. Humanity is stripped down to its essence, revealing both the divine spark of angels and the rapacious hunger of vultures. The angels appear first, in small, quiet ways. They are the ones who did not flee, who did not barricade themselves away, who did not succumb to the all-consuming fear. They are the ones who chose duty over survival. You see a Franciscan friar, a man whose order has been decimated by the plague. His face as gaunt and pale as any of the sick. He walks the empty streets, not with the wild-eyed fervor of the flagellants, but with a quiet, exhausted determination. He goes to the houses marked with the plague cross, the houses that all others shun. He does not offer cures, he knows there are none. He brings only a cup of clean water, a whispered prayer, a hand held in the final moments. He knows that entering these houses is almost certainly a death sentence. Yet he goes anyway. He is a shepherd tending to a dying flock. His faith not a shield to protect himself, but a light to offer others in their final darkness. You discover a small convent of nuns near the edge of the city that has transformed itself into an orphanage. The sisters, many of them young women from noble families, have gathered the children they have found wandering the streets, children whose parents have been taken by the sickness or have abandoned them in their flight. They have little food, but they share what they have. You watch from a distance as they lead the children in song. Their small, clear voices a shocking and beautiful sound in the silent city. A fragile testament to the stubborn persistence of care and hope. These are not grand, public acts. They are small, quiet battles waged against despair. You see a shutter creak open and a loaf of bread lowered in a basket to the doorstep of a neighbor who is too terrified to come out. You see a man, his own face a mask of grief, spending a day shoring up the door of an elderly widow's house. Not for pay, but to protect her from the city's other emerging faction, the vultures, for every act of selfless charity. You witness 10 acts of shameless depravity? The breakdown of law and order is absolute. The city guard is gone, the magistrates are dead or in hiding, and into this vacuum of authority, the city's predators emerge. The bikini, the body collectors, are no longer just hauling the dead. They have become the masters of the empty city. They roam in gangs, no longer waiting for a summons, but breaking down the doors of the wealthy palazzi. You hide in a dark alley one afternoon and watch a group of them, drunk on stolen wine, systematically loot the home of a silk merchant you once knew. They use his fine tapestries to wrap up silver plates and candlesticks. One of them puts on the dead merchant's velvet robes and prances in the street, laughing a high, mad laugh. The city has a new and thriving industry, unsolicited home reorganization. The practitioners enter your home without asking, and reorganize all of your most valuable possessions into their own sacks. A new, more insidious crime emerges. One that, as a former clerk, you understand with a sickening clarity, with entire families wiped out. The line of inheritance is often broken. Audacious criminals, learning that a wealthy family is dead, will simply move into their home. They will put on the dead man's clothes, learn his name, and if anyone questions them, they claim to be a long-lost cousin from a distant town, the sole surviving heir, with the record keepers dead and the courts closed. There's no one to dispute their claim. Claiming to be the long-lost heir to a dead nobleman is now a popular career choice. The main job requirement is a straight face and the ability to look good in stolen clothes. And then there are the quacks. Charlatans and false doctors appear, preying on the terror of the wealthy survivors who have barricaded themselves in their homes. They sell ludicrously expensive plague remedies potions made from powdered unicorn horn, likely the tusk of a narwhal, bezoar stones from the stomachs of goats, or foul-smelling amulets filled with arsenic and herbs. They know these things are useless, but they also know that a man in fear for his life will pay any price for a sliver of hope. You, too, face a moral crisis. You are starving. The hunger is a constant, gnawing ache in your belly. You walk past the open doors of the dead every day. You see pantries still stocked with food, wine still in the cellars. It would be so easy. No one would ever know. The law is dead. The city is a free-for-all. Why should you? An honest man. Starve while the bikini feast. You stand one day before the open door of a bakery. The baker and his family are gone. You recorded their names in your ledger weeks ago. Inside, you can see loaves of bread on the shelves. Hard and stale, but still food. Your stomach screams at you to go in. But something holds you back. The ingrained habit of a lifetime. The muscle memory of being a man of laws, of records, of order. You are a clerk. Clerks do not steal. It is a ridiculous, meaningless distinction in a world gone mad. But it is the last thread connecting you to the man you used to be. You turn away from the bakery, your hunger a burning fire, but with that small, fragile piece of your soul intact, it turns out that years of filling out forms in triplicate is a surprisingly effective defense against moral collapse. Your journal is your only confidant. You no longer record names and dates. You record what you see. You write about the friar's quiet courage. You write about the looter's vicious glee. You are no longer a clerk of the city, but a chronicler of human nature. Stripped bare, in your walks, you begin to see the first stirrings of a new kind of faith. The old saints seem to have failed the people, so they are turning to new, more specialized patrons. Scratched onto a door with a piece of charcoal, you see a crude drawing of a man with arrows sticking out of him, Saint Sebastian. The plague was often called God's arrow, and so the people turned to the saint who survived being shot with arrows. Praying he can intercede for them, you hear a sick woman crying out not to Mary, but to St. Roch, a pilgrim saint who, according to legend, was afflicted with a plague bubo himself and was healed. In the absence of living doctors, the people are creating a new roster of celestial physicians. The chapter of your life as a silent observer culminates one evening. You have found a relatively safe place to shelter for the night. The abandoned upper floor of a tailor's shop, with a window overlooking a small piazza. From this vantage point, you witness two scenes, one after the other. In the center of the piazza, two gangs of looters have come into conflict. They are fighting over a piece of loot. A heavy silver candlestick one of them has taken from the nearby church. The fight is brutal, fought with knives and cudgels. It ends with two men dead on the cobblestones, their blood mixing with the grime. The other men scattering into the darkness. The candlestick left forgotten beside the bodies. It is a scene of pure, selfish, violent greed. You turn your gaze from the grisly scene and look down a narrow alley that feeds into the piazza, and you see another figure. It is the gaunt Franciscan friar. His work for the day done, he is sitting on the steps of a doorway, and with him is a small child, a girl of 5 or 6, crying silently, her face streaked with dirt. She is one of the city's new orphans. The friar, who looks as if he has not eaten a full meal in a month, takes out a small piece of bread from the pouch at his belt. He breaks it in two and gives the larger piece to the child. You watch these two scenes under the cold, in different light of the moon. A murder over a piece of silver, an act of pure charity over a piece of bread. The vultures and the angels. You realize the plague is no longer the city's greatest struggle. The disease has done its work. The true battle now is for what comes next. It is a struggle for the soul of what little remains of your city. A battle being waged in the hearts of every one of the few. Terrified survivors. The city, which had seemed to sink into a quiet coma of despair, is granted no such peace as the heat of summer intensifies. The plague, which had been smoldering in the embers of the stricken populace, roars back to life with a renewed and terrifying vigor. It is a final, great wave, a storm surge of death that aims to take what little is left. The small acts of kindness you witnessed become rarer, drowned out by a rising tide of final, frantic desperation. In the midst of this renewed chaos, you find a strange, new purpose, your old job, as a clerk for a city that no longer functions, is a ghost, but the habits of a lifetime are strong. The world has descended into madness, and your soul recoils, seeking refuge in the only thing that ever made sense to you: order, process, and the written record. You make a decision. It is a mad, impossible, and utterly pointless decision, and yet it feels like the only sane thing to do. You will resume your work. You will keep the tally of the dead. You return to your abandoned office in the palazzo. The room is thick with dust. The parchments on the desks curled and damp. You gather what you can: a few clean ledgers, a pot of ink that has not yet dried out, a handful of sharpened quills. This will be your new counting house, a solitary outpost of record-keeping in a world that has forgotten how to count. Your methodology is no longer official. It is grimly empirical. You cannot rely on reports from priests or physicians. You must become the city's accountant of death yourself, eh? Each dawn, you begin your rounds, you walk the silent streets, your journal in hand, and you count. You walk through a parish and count the houses marked with the ominous plague cross. Making a tick mark for each, you stand in the shadows near the plague pits as the sun rises, counting the number of death carts that arrive to tip their grisly cargo into the earth. You learn to estimate the number of bodies in each cart: 10, 15, sometimes 20. The numbers are staggering. At first, you try to get names. You speak to the bikini, the body collectors, offering them a small coin you have found in an abandoned shop for any names they can give you. They just laugh, their eyes dead. They have no names, one grunts. They're just cargo. So you abandon names. You abandon ages. You abandon all the humanizing details. You are reduced to the stark, brutal arithmetic of the plague. Your ledger, once filled with the elegant script of legal disputes, is now a terrifying wall of tick marks, grouped in fives, next to the name of a street or a parish. San Lorenzo 27 dead, the Street of the Weavers 43 dead, the Dock 68 dead. The sheer scale of the numbers begins to exert a terrible weight on your soul. 100 deaths a day becomes 200. On the worst days, you estimate the number to be over 500? 500 souls? In a single day, in a city that once held perhaps 50,000 people. You look at the number, and your mind struggles to comprehend it. It is an abstraction. Yet it is the most brutal reality you have ever known. The numbers threaten to erase your own humanity, to turn you into a machine that simply counts and records. You have to actively fight to remember that each tick mark on your page was a life, a person with hopes and memories, now reduced to a single, vertical slash of ink. One evening, the weight becomes too much. You are in your office. The ledger open before you. The tally for the day is monstrous, the worst yet. You look at the endless rows of marks, and a wave of utter futility washes over you. What is the point of this? Who are you counting for? There will be no one left to read this record. Your ledger is an epitaph for a city that has already died. You are overwhelmed by an impulse to destroy it, to throw the book of horrors into a fire and let the ashes scatter on the wind, to let the dead remain uncounted, to let the silence be total. You stand with the heavy book in your hands, ready to hurl it into the cold hearth. But then, a memory surfaces. The face of the old woman in the window, her frail hand lowering the basket with a small, wrinkled apple. The sound of the Franciscan friar's quiet prayer. These small, seemingly pointless acts of goodness. They did not stop the plague. They did not save the city. But they happened. They were real. And you understand, in a moment of piercing clarity, that some things are not done because they are effective, but because they are right. Recording the truth, even a truth no one will ever read, is an act of defiance against the chaos. It is a testament that order once existed, and that you were here to witness its passing. You place the ledger back on the desk. You will continue to count. The strain of your self-appointed task takes its toll. You grow thinner, your body fueled by little more than scavenged bread and a grim determination. You are constantly in the presence of the sick and the dead. Your every breath an act of faith against the invisible pestilence. One day, you fall ill. A fever takes you, and a great shivering. You collapse in your small, sheltered room, convinced that your time has finally come. You lie there for 2 days, drifting in and out of consciousness, your body aching. You feel for the telltale buboes in your groin and armpits, but there are none. On the 3rd day, the fever breaks. It was just a common fever, a cruel trick played on you by your exhausted body and terrified mind. You survive, weaker than ever, but with a strange, renewed sense of purpose. You have been spared, and you do not know why. A few weeks later, you learn of a death that strikes you harder than any number in your ledger. You encounter a young priest you know, one of the few still making his rounds. He tells you that Dr. Antonio is dead. He died alone in his home. Having sent his wife and children to the country weeks ago, he had continued to treat the sick long after he knew his arts were useless, until the pestilence finally claimed him as well. The death of this good, rational man. This man who represented the best of your civilization's knowledge. Feels like a final symbolic blow. If he could not be saved, then the old world is truly dead and buried. This news galvanizes your work. You are no longer just counting. You are building a monument. Your ledger is not for the magistrates or for future historians you cannot imagine. It is for Dr. Antonio. It is for the baker's daughter. It is for the thousands of nameless, faceless victims. It is the only gravestone the city of Genoa will ever have. The summer peaks in a maelstrom of death. You lose track of the days. Your world becomes a simple, horrifying loop-wake. Walk, count, record, sleep. You move through the city like a somnambulist. Your mind insulated from the horror by the monotonous rhythm of your work. The chapter ends on a hot, breathless night in late summer. You are back in your office. The air thick and still. You have just completed the tally for what you know. Instinctively, was the peak the absolute summit of the plague's fury. The number you have written on the page is so large it seems like a fantasy. It is a number that represents a significant fraction of the city you once knew. Gone. In a single day, you put down your quill. Your hand is cramped into a claw. Your soul is an empty, aching void. You cannot write another mark. The numbers have finally defeated you. They have become a meaningless, shrieking horror. You look out the window. The moon is full, casting a ghostly, silver light on the empty streets and silent rooftops. There are no lights in the windows. There are no sounds from the streets. There is only a vast, profound, and absolute silence. A silence that seems to emanate from the earth itself. It is the silence of a completed work. The plague has done what it came to do. You look at the ledger, at the numbers that fail to capture the truth, and you look out at the dead city, a city that has become a ledger of its own. You feel as if you are the last man alive on earth, the solitary keeper of an incomprehensible account. You do not know how long you remain in your stupor, sitting in the dusty, silent office as the city finishes the work of dying. Days, a week. Time has lost its meaning. You eat what little scavenged food you have. You sleep. You stare at the ledger filled with its monstrous tally. But you do not add another mark to it. The counting is over. There is nothing left to count but the silence. Your world has been reduced to a state of profound and empty waiting. Waiting for what? You do not know. Perhaps your own end. Perhaps your the first sign of change is not a sight, but a sound. Or rather, a lack of one. One night, you are startled from a shallow sleep by an unfamiliar quiet. You strain your ears, trying to identify what is different, and then you realize the death cart, its nightly, rumbling passage down your street has not happened. For the first time in months, the night is undisturbed by its grim work. You dismiss it. The bikini are likely drunk, or have finally succumbed themselves. But the next night, the cart passes, and you listen with the grim expertise you have acquired. The rumble seems shorter, the shouts of the men fewer, the thud of the bodies being loaded less frequent. A new and terrifying emotion begins to stir in the numb, hollow space of your soul, hope. It is a fragile, painful thing, a green shoot pushing through scorched earth. You are terrified of it. You have seen too much death to believe in its opposite. You are certain it is a trick, a cruel pause before a final, even more terrible wave. But the trend continues. The single church bell that still tolls seems to ring less often. The air, while still foul, seems to carry less of the immediate, cloying sweetness of the sick room. After 2 weeks of this strange new quiet, you cannot bear the uncertainty any longer. You must know if it is real. You take up a fresh sheet of parchment and, with a trembling hand, you go out to resume your count. It is a different kind of counting now. It is a survey of fear. You walk your old routes, your eyes scanning the doors. You see the crosses, the signs of the plague, on almost every other door. But you are looking for new ones, and you see fewer of them. You spend a dawn at the plague pits, hiding, watching. The carts still come, but there are only 2 of them, not the 10 or 12 you saw at the peak. The numbers are still horrific by any sane measure. Dozens are still dying every day. But dozens are not hundreds. The black tide of death, while still deep and deadly, is no longer at flood. It is, you realize with a cautious, breathtaking wonder, beginning to recede. The fever is breaking as the immediate, overwhelming threat lessens. The city begins to stir. The survivors, the ones who endured by locking themselves away, begin to emerge. It is a slow and hesitant resurrection. A shutter that has been sealed for months creaks open. A pale, fearful face peers out, scanning the empty street, then disappears. The next day, a door is unbarred for a few moments, letting in a sliver of fresh air before being slammed shut again. The people who emerge are not the vibrant, confident Genoese you remember. They are a new tribe. The tribe of the traumatized. They are gaunt from malnutrition, their eyes wide and haunted. They move through the streets of their own city like trespassers, flinching at every sound. They avoid each other. A legacy of the time when every other human was a potential source of contagion. Meeting another living person is a complicated social event. The new customary greeting is to stare at each other from a safe distance of 20 feet for a long, silent minute before one of you gets nervous and walks away. But slowly, hesitantly, connections are reestablished. You see a woman recognize a neighbor across a piazza. They don't rush to embrace. They stand apart. And they weep. They weep for their shared losses, for their shared survival. You have your own such encounter. The old woman you gave bread to, the one who gave you an apple in return, has survived. You see her one day, cleaning the doorstep of her home. She sees you. You both simply nod. A quiet acknowledgement. We are still here. It is a conversation more profound than any you have ever had. You begin to notice a strange new scent in the air. A scent that has been absent for so long, you had forgotten it existed. The smell of the living. The warm, slightly salty, unremarkable smell of a healthy human body. After months of smelling only sickness and decay, it is a shocking and beautiful aroma. Your own psychological state is a turbulent sea. There are moments of pure, giddy euphoria. You are alive. You have walked through the valley of the shadow of death and emerged on the other side. You want to laugh, to shout, to run through the empty streets. But these moments are inevitably followed by crushing waves of grief and guilt. Why you? Why did you survive when the baker's daughter? When Dr. Antonio? When millions of others did not? There is no answer. The randomness of it is its own kind of horror. The plague has left you with the heaviest burden of all the burden of being alive. The practical needs of the survivors begin to force a new, rudimentary society into existence. There is no government, no law, but there is work to be done. A communal well has been fouled by a dead animal. A small group of men, working together, cleans it out. A street is blocked by an overturned cart and the refuse of a looted house. The survivors of that street work together to clear it. These are the first. Tentative steps towards rebuilding a world. And your skills. Once again, find a new purpose. A small, informal council of some of the more prominent, surviving citizens, a few junior magistrates like Niccolo. A handful of guildmasters is formed. They know of you. They know of your grim work, counting the dead. They summon you. We don't even know who is left. Niccolo tells you. His own face aged 20 years by the ordeal. We need a new record. Not a bill of mortality. A bill of life. We need a census. A tally of the living. The task is daunting. It is the exact reverse of your previous one. It requires you to go to every street, every house that does not bear the plague cross, and knock. It requires you to face the fearful, suspicious survivors and convince them to give you their names. for months. Your job was to write down the names of the dead. Now, your job is to write down the names of the living. It's the same work, but the feeling is, you have to admit, considerably better. You agree. You take a new, clean ledger, and you begin. It is slow, painstaking work. Most people refuse to open their doors at first. They shout at you through the wood, demanding to know your business. But when you explain, when you tell them you are taking account of those who have survived, you feel a shift. The fear in their voices is replaced by a flicker of something else. Pride, defiance. You walk down a familiar street, one where you had recorded dozens of deaths. You come to a house that you were certain was empty, that had been silent for months. You knock on the door. You wait. You are about to turn away when you hear the slow, rusty sound of a bolt being drawn. The door creaks open a few inches. A man's face peers out. You recognize him. He was a weaver you knew by sight, a man you had assumed was long dead. He is painfully thin, his beard matted, his eyes haunted, but he is alive. He looks at you, suspicion warring with a dawning recognition. I am taking a census for the city, you say, your voice gentle. A record of who is left, your name. He stares at you for a long moment, then seems to understand the profound significance of the question. A flicker of a smile touches his lips. Marco, he says, his voice a hoarse whisper. Marco the Weaver. I am still here. You dip your quill in your ink pot, and you write his name in your new ledger, not in the long, horrifying column of the dead, but in the new, short, and infinitely precious column of the living. The sun is breaking through the clouds. The air feels clean. It is the first quiet dawn of a new and shattered world. The census of the living becomes your life's work in the months that follow the plague's retreat. It is a slow, heartbreaking, and strangely sacred task. You walk through a city of ghosts, knocking on doors that have remained sealed for the better part of a year. Sometimes, there is no answer. Sometimes, a suspicious eye peers through a crack before the door is barred again. But more and more often, the door opens. A survivor, thin and haunted but undeniably alive, gives you their name, and you add it to the short, precious list in your new ledger. Your tally confirms the horrifying truth. Entire districts of the city are virtually empty. You walk down streets where every single house is marked with the dried, faded plague cross. In a neighborhood that once housed 1,000 people, your census might find only 100. The city has been hollowed out. Its population has been cut in half, or perhaps more. The scale of the loss is beyond grief, beyond comprehension. It is simply a fact, a new and terrible foundation upon which a new world must be built, as the immediate fear of the pestilence recedes. The survivors are faced with the practical challenges of this new, empty world and you. As a man of records in a city where most records have been lost or rendered meaningless, find yourself in an unexpected position of importance. The economy is shattered, but it is also being reborn, with the labor force decimated. A simple, powerful economic truth emerges. A living worker is now an immensely valuable thing. You witness peasants and craftsmen, who before the plague would have worked for whatever meager wage their masters offered, now demanding and receiving double or triple their old pay. There are not enough hands to till the fields, to man the docks, to rebuild the walls. For the first time, the common laborer has power. Conversely, wealth consolidates at the top with breathtaking speed. A merchant who survives, along with his 2 brothers and 4 cousins, might find himself the sole heir to 7 different fortunes. Noble families who lost dozens of members suddenly control vast tracts of land and dozens of empty houses. The gap between the surviving poor, whose labor is now valuable, and the surviving rich, whose inherited wealth is now immense, widens into a chasm? Your skills are in desperate demand. You are one of the few clerks left who knows the old laws, who can read the old deeds. You spend your days in the chilly, echoing halls of the palazzo, helping the city's makeshift new council sort through the chaotic tangle of inheritances. You are the arbiter of who owns what in a city of the dead. You have gone from a junior scribe to a vital civic administrator. Not through ambition, but by the simple, brutal fact of your own survival. You witness the birth of a new artistic consciousness, a new way of seeing the world. One day, you see a painter, a man whose work once consisted of serene portraits of the Madonna, beginning a new fresco on the wall of a church. He is not painting saints. He is painting skeletons. He paints a great, grinning figure of death, leading a chain of people in a grim dance. In the chain is a pope, a king, a nobleman in his fine robes, a merchant with his purse, and a simple peasant. The danse macabre, the dance of death. It is a shocking, morbid image. But everyone who sees it understands its truth immediately. The plague was the great equalizer. It taught the world a lesson that no sermon ever could that in the end. Death comes for everyone. The psychological landscape of the city has been permanently altered. The survivors are a changed people. They are more devout, packing the churches to give thanks for their deliverance, but they are also more worldly, more alive to the pleasures of the flesh. They have looked into the abyss, and having survived, they are determined to live the life that remains to them with a new, sometimes frantic, intensity. The city slowly comes back to life, but it is a different life, louder, more cautious, and forever haunted by the memory of the great silence. Years pass. The city of Genoa recovers. New people are born, and new merchants arrive from other lands to fill the empty spaces. The harbor is once again a forest of masts. The streets are once again loud with the sounds of commerce. The memory of the great pestilence begins to fade, becoming a story that grandparents tell their grandchildren, a tale to frighten them into behaving. One day, you are an old man. Your hair is white. Your hand is spotted with age, but it is still steady. You are a respected elder of the city, a man known for his wisdom and his quiet, somber demeanor. You go to the city archives, to the vault where the most important records are kept. You ask the young clerk on duty to bring you a specific ledger, a book bound in dark, worn leather that has not been opened in decades. He brings it to you. You run your hand over the cover. It is your old ledger, the tally of the dead. You open it. The ink is faded, but the names and the endless, horrifying columns of tick marks are still there. You read the pages, and the memory of that terrible year comes rushing back. The smell of the death carts, the sound of the weeping, the face of Dr. Antonio, the small, shrouded form of the baker's daughter. You close the book. It is the history of a world that is gone. Your world. You. The last witness. And so your story ends. You. The quiet clerk who became the memory of a city. Live out the remainder of your days in peace. The world you helped to rebuild is a different world. A world forever scarred and changed by the great dying. But a world that, nonetheless, continued. Life, stubbornly and miraculously, went on. The terror of that time is now history. It is a story written in a dusty book, a tale whispered down through the centuries to this quiet room, to this safe and peaceful moment. The sounds of the death carts are gone, replaced only by the soft hum of the world outside your window. The fear of the pestilence is gone, leaving only a gentle stillness in the air. The great, overwhelming silence of the plague city has been defeated by the simple, steady rhythm of your own breathing. The world did not end. The sun rose again. Day after day. The ships returned to the harbor. Children were born, and their laughter eventually filled the empty streets once more. Even after the darkest of nights, There is always a dawn. And now, as our story comes to its close, it is time for your own quiet dawn to be set aside for a time of peaceful rest. Let the story fade. Let the history sleep. And let you, safe and sound, do the same